Imagine being the most powerful man in Rome. You've beaten your rivals, taken over huge parts of Europe, made yourself dictator, and convinced yourself that the people around you are loyal. Then one morning, you walk into a meeting and your friends surround you. Instead of discussing politics, they pull out knives. That is basically how Julius Caesar's story ended. And the worst part is that some of the men involved were people he trusted. Right? Julius Caesar was born in Rome in 100 BC, and from early on, he was ambitious, very ambitious. Rome at the time was technically a republic, meaning there was no king and power was supposed to be shared between elected officials, senators, and wealthy families. At least that was the idea. In reality, Roman politics was chaotic, full of bribery, violence, backroom deals, and powerful families constantly fighting each other, so pretty calm stuff. Caesar came from an old Roman family, but he wasn't insanely wealthy compared with some of Rome's biggest political players. What he did have was confidence, and quite a lot of it. He worked his way through Roman politics by serving in the military, holding public offices, building alliances, and spending ridiculous amounts of money to become popular. Eventually, Caesar joined forces with two of the most powerful men in Rome: Pompey, a famous general, and Crassus, one of the richest men in Roman history. The three formed an unofficial political alliance that we now call the First Triumvirate. Basically, three extremely powerful men decided Rome would be much easier to control if they worked together. For a while, it worked. Then Caesar became governor of parts of Gaul, covering modern-day France and surrounding areas, and this is where he became a superstar, right? From 58 BC, Caesar launched a series of military campaigns across Gaul, fighting tribes across huge areas, crossing the Rhine, invading Britain twice, and turning himself into one of Rome's most successful generals. His soldiers loved him because Caesar fought alongside them, rewarded them, remembered their names, and most importantly, won a lot. By the time the Gallic Wars were over, Caesar had gained enormous wealth, huge military influence, and an army that was personally loyal to him, which was slightly worrying if you were sitting back in Rome. Pompey certainly thought so. The alliance between Caesar and Pompey had already started falling apart. Crassus had died during a disastrous campaign against the Parthians, while Pompey had moved closer to Caesar's political enemies in the Senate. Suddenly, the two men who had once worked together were basically preparing for war. The Senate ordered Caesar to give up command of his army and return to Rome. But there was one obvious problem. If Caesar returned as an ordinary citizen, his enemies could prosecute him. So he had a choice: give up his army, walk back into Rome, and hope everybody suddenly decided to be nice, or do something completely illegal. In January 49 BC, Caesar marched his army across the Rubicon River. Roman generals were forbidden from bringing armies into Italy without permission, so crossing that river with troops was effectively a declaration of war. Caesar had just started a civil war. Pompey and much of the Senate fled Rome, and Caesar followed. The fighting spread across the Roman world, from Spain to Greece, Egypt, and Africa, until Caesar eventually defeated Pompey's forces. Pompey fled to Egypt, where the Egyptian rulers decided the easiest solution was simply to kill him. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, Pompey's severed head was presented to him. Not exactly the reunion he was expecting. Caesar then became involved in Egyptian politics, and yes, this is where Cleopatra enters the story. He supported Cleopatra during a struggle for the Egyptian throne. The two became lovers, and Cleopatra later gave birth to a son named Caesarion. Whether Caesar officially accepted the boy as his son is a bit more complicated, but Rome definitely noticed the relationship. Eventually, Caesar returned to Rome as the undisputed winner of the Civil War, and now he had a lot of power. Probably too much power. He was appointed dictator, first temporarily, then for longer periods, and finally dictator for life. That phrase made some Romans extremely uncomfortable. Rome hated kings, like really hated them. The Roman Republic had been built around the idea that no single person should rule permanently, and now Caesar was sitting at the top with enormous authority. His face appeared on Roman coins while he was still alive. Statues were built in his honor. He controlled political appointments, and senators increasingly worried that Caesar had no intention of giving power back. To be fair, some of his reforms were genuinely useful. He changed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar that became the basis for the calendar we basically still use today, while also reforming debt, expanding citizenship, starting building projects, and reorganizing parts of the Roman government. But none of that mattered to senators who believed Rome was slowly turning into a monarchy. Then came another awkward moment. At a public festival, Mark Antony attempted to place a crown on Caesar's head, and Caesar refused it more than once. His supporters saw this as proof that he didn't want to become king. His enemies, not convinced. Rumors spread that Caesar secretly wanted the title anyway, and eventually a group of senators decided they had seen enough. Around 60 men became involved in a conspiracy with one very simple goal: kill Caesar and, supposedly, save the Republic. Among the conspirators were two men who would become particularly famous: Cassius and Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus is important because Caesar trusted him. Brutus had actually fought against Caesar during the Civil War, but after Caesar won, he forgave him, allowed him back into political life, and treated him with considerable favor. So having Brutus join the conspiracy probably hurt a little more. The conspirators chose the 15th of March, 44 BC, the Ides of March. There were apparently warnings beforehand. A fortune teller was said to have warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March, while his wife, Calpurnia, reportedly had disturbing dreams and begged him not to attend the Senate meeting. For a moment, Caesar considered staying home, which would have made this story considerably shorter, but one of the conspirators convinced him to go. The Senate wasn't meeting in the usual Senate house that day. Instead, they gathered inside a hall connected to the theater of Pompey, which is already pretty ironic. Caesar had defeated Pompey, and now he was about to die inside Pompey's complex. Caesar entered the meeting, and the conspirators quickly gathered around him. One senator approached, pretending to ask for a favor, while the others closed in. Then someone grabbed Caesar's toga. That was the signal. The first knife came out, and one conspirator stabbed Caesar near the neck. Caesar reportedly fought back, grabbing the attacker's arm and using his writing stylus to defend himself. Then more knives appeared. Suddenly, Caesar realized this wasn't one angry senator. It was basically everyone around him. He was surrounded as the conspirators stabbed him again and again. Ancient sources say Caesar was stabbed 23 times, although later analysis of those accounts suggested only one wound may actually have been immediately fatal. Still, 23 is not ideal. Then Caesar saw Brutus among the attackers, and this is where history and Shakespeare start mixing together. Most people know the famous line, "Et tu, Brute," meaning "you too, Brutus," but there is no reliable evidence Caesar actually said that. Shakespeare made the line famous centuries later. One ancient source suggested Caesar may have said something in Greek to Brutus, while another version says he said nothing at all. Either way, the meaning of the moment is pretty clear. One of the men Caesar had forgiven and trusted was standing among the people killing him. Caesar eventually stopped resisting, pulled part of his toga over himself, collapsed at the base of a statue of Pompey, and died. The most powerful man in Rome lying dead beneath a statue of his former rival. The assassins had done it. Caesar was gone. Now surely the Roman Republic would be saved, except that is not what happened at all. The conspirators walked out announcing that Rome was free, but ordinary Romans were confused and many were furious. Caesar had been incredibly popular with large parts of the population and military. Then Mark Antony took control of Caesar's funeral and publicly displayed Caesar's bloodied clothing. The crowd became furious, violence broke out, and some of the conspirators fled Rome. Instead of saving the Republic, the assassination triggered another round of civil wars. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, was only 18, but he was extremely smart and extremely patient. He joined forces with Mark Antony and Lepidus, and together they hunted Caesar's assassins. Brutus and Cassius eventually raised armies of their own, but in 42 BC they were defeated at the Battle of Philippi. Cassius died, and Brutus later took his own life after defeat. The men who killed Caesar to stop one man becoming too powerful had basically created the conditions for an even more powerful ruler. Octavian eventually defeated Mark Antony, took control of Rome, and became Augustus, Rome's first emperor. So the assassination of Julius Caesar didn't really save the Republic, it helped finish it. Caesar had crossed rivers, conquered Gaul, defeated Pompey, survived civil war, and made himself the most powerful man in Rome. But the threat that finally got him wasn't some army waiting outside the city, it was the people standing next to him. Men he knew, men he had worked with, and in Brutus's case, a man he had forgiven. 23 stab wounds, a room full of senators, and one of the most famous betrayals in history. Julius Caesar spent years defeating Rome's enemies. In the end, Rome didn't need an enemy. His own friends did the job. This has been Comic Book Cases. Thanks for joining us on today's deep dive into Julius Caesar. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.